Welcome back to Morning Joe. A sailor assigned to the aircraft carrier USS Roosevelt has died from coronavirus-related complications. The Navy announced that news yesterday. It is the first death of a sailor from the virus-stricken carrier that was forced to dock in Guam last month. The Navy said it was also the first virus-caused death of an active service member. In all, nearly 600 members of the 5,000 stationed aboard the Roosevelt have tested positive for COVID-19. All have been removed from the ship and are now living in isolated quarters on Guam. 4 were hospitalized over the weekend, but none in intensive care. You'll remember the outbreak led to the removal of Captain Brett Crozier after his letter demanding action from the Navy was leaked to the press. Shortly thereafter, Acting Secretary of the Navy Thomas Modly resigned after he cost taxpayers $250,000 to fly to the ship to insult Captain Crozier to his own crew. Joining us now, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, retired 4-star Navy Admiral James Stavridis. He is Chief International Security and Diplomacy Analyst for NBC News and MSNBC. Admiral Stavridis, it's great to have you on. You have commanded a carrier strike group yourself. You know what it's like to lead a group of men aboard a ship like this. It seems to me that the death we saw yesterday is exactly what Captain Crozier was worried about, what he warned about, and what he was fired for.
That's exactly right, Willie. And let's first, why is this? And why do we have 600 sailors? That's 10% of the crew. So think of that adjusted nationally for the United States. That would be as though the United States had somewhere around 35 million cases. We've got about 500,000. So the carrier is full of COVID-19. Why is that? I'd invite everybody to think about your kitchen at home, say a nice suburban kitchen, except think of it with 15 people living in it. They're packed in there. Our sailors are in these berthing compartments, which turn into places where coronavirus simply multiplies. Captain Crozier knew that. He saw that coming. I believe he first went to the chain of command. He didn't get sufficient action from all I can see. We'll have an investigation that'll tell us exactly what happened. But then he did what I think a commanding officer should do. He put the welfare and safety of his crew first, because we are not at war. If we were at war, we would fight through it, would fight with 10% of the crew ill. We could do that. We're not at war. The captain made the right call, pushing the Navy to take that ship offline. It is a tragedy that that sailor died, but everything that has happened, in my view, validates what Captain Crozier attempted to do.
Admiral, obviously he was making that plea, Captain Crozier, when it went public out of desperation because he didn't think he was getting the support he needed up the chain of command, as you point out. As you look back on it, should he have acted any differently at all? Obviously, Acting Secretary Modly flew halfway around the world to board that ship and do what he thought, I think, President Trump would want him to do. It turned out he was wrong about that in trashing the captain, who was beloved by his crew, who was cheered as he left the ship after being relieved of his command. Did Captain Crozier do anything wrong, in your view, as someone who has commanded one of these ships yourself?
I want to see the results of the investigation that tell us exactly what relief was offered to Captain Crozier before he launched that missile of a letter. And should he have kept that in classified channels? Yes, I think he should have. Should he have had a narrow distribution of that letter strictly to his chain of command? Yes, he should have. In desperation, instead of a broadly released letter, he could have picked up the phone and called the Chief of Naval Operations and called the Secretary of the Navy. Instead, he took a very public push. He must have felt that that was what was required to keep his crew safe. So I think he would probably say, look, I took those chances. I knew my career was at risk, but I did what I felt I had to do for my crew. And, you know, when I see that video of hundreds, if not thousands, of his crew members cheering him as he left the ship, I think that that's a commanding officer who can walk off T.R. Roosevelt, legacy of President Roosevelt, with his head held high.
Admiral, and now we know nearly 600 sailors aboard that ship have it, Joe, and one of them has died. Joe?
Good.
Yeah, and so Admiral,
let's just look at this crisis that we're facing. There's obviously a lack of leadership coming out of the White House. And I think even many of Donald Trump's own supporters would agree with that. It's been erratic, frightening how we lost well over a month in February as we've gone through the timeline. But every scientist, every doctor says we can expect this to reemerge in the fall. You have been in charge of leading so many men and women. You've been in charge of logistics. Tell me, Admiral, how would you handle this crisis starting today, planning for not only to reopen the country, but also to look forward to the fall and prepare for the second wave of this pandemic?
Joe, first and foremost, I would emphasize what we've all been talking about, which is a national level campaign of testing until we can open our eyes, literally, and see what's in front of us with some certainty. We're not going to make the right choices. So first and foremost is testing. Secondly, keep the foot on the pedal of treatment so that we can have palliatives. That's the key to reopening the country, is the testing regime coupled with a treatment regime. Then you put it in a rolling wave, and it is like a military campaign. You have to have goals. You have to have timelines. You're going to move regionally and safely. And then third and finally, I would encourage leadership to be thinking about what can the military do in this. We've seen just the edge of that with Comfort and Mercy, some deployments of our National Guard. Joe, as you know, there are 1.2 million young men and women, all volunteers, predisposed to serve others in the military today. There are 800,000 reservists. It's an enormous force. If we were thinking now about that second wave, we could think coherently about how we could employ all of that to help us in what I think is almost inevitably a second wave, but one that we will be vastly better prepared to deal with.
So, Admiral, finally, obviously, people who consider us, countries who consider themselves to be enemies of the United States of America, are going to look for weaknesses, are going to look possibly to attack us in weak spots when we are down. What's the greatest national security threat other than this pandemic that you would be telling the president to be prepared for?
You know, the conventional answer to that would be watch out for China, which seems to have made the turn more swiftly than we have coming out of this, although we can't really trust their numbers. But I'll tell you what I would watch for. I would watch for cyber and a cyber attack for two reasons. One is we're constantly vulnerable in this zone. But now, as so many of our businesses, our economic processes, our military activities, indeed, are shifting over into the cybersphere as we put everything online, creates a new vulnerability. It won't just be China. Russia's very good. Iran, quite capable. North Korea, not bad. Watch for cyber as a threat based on the way we're shifting the economy at the moment.
All right. Retired four-star Admiral James Stavridis, thank you so much. And coming up, President Trump insists he alone can reopen the country. Eugene Robinson says a different group has the power, we the people. We will read from Gene's new column just ahead on
And
Morning
we're going to be
Joe.
talking about that Wisconsin result that has
Big
really
news.
shocked the White House. And people obviously
That was a
looking
shocker.
forward to the 2020 election. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.